It's really a personal decision as well. Locking in that rate, not having to think about it. A lot of people that have not had variable before, and over the past year and a half, variable actually outpaced fixed as far as the product being sold. So a lot of new people with variable, they kind of overthink it. They, really, focus in on what the Bank of Canada is doing and how that's going to impact them. One thing to keep in mind from a quick math standpoint, with this rate hike of 0.5%, so 0.5% has scared everyone. It equates to $23 every $100,000 in your mortgage. So for somebody with a $300,000 mortgage, your rate is changing by $69.
You're listening to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast with your hosts, Paul Stevenson, David Warren, and Greg Campbell. Let's see what's going on in the world of real estate today.
Hello, welcome to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast. We are back. It's Easter weekend, long weekend. We're here, most of us. It's David and I today. My name is Paul Stevenson. I'm one of the owners at Referral Mortgages. I'm also a mortgage agent. And I'm joined with David Warren, who is also an owner at Referral Mortgages. Couldn't tell by the logo in the background. And also a mortgage agent. I need to get one of those, I think, for that brick wall behind me. Just a big Referral logo.
I think Greg had too many chocolates.
Greg got into the chocolates last night. Yeah, been an interesting week. Might as well just hop right into it. Been an interesting week. We've seen some big announcements. Obviously, the federal budget came out the week before, which we touched on last episode. And then last week, as expected, Bank of Canada has announced that they are hiking rates. They're hiking the overnight lending rate. So banks now, prime has moved from 2.7 up to 3.2 for most lenders. So anyone who is currently in a variable rate, this obviously impacts you. And David, what have you been seeing? What have you been hearing from kind of your clients, your realtor partners, et cetera? What's the word on the street? How's everyone feeling about this?
Definitely a lot of people reaching out. That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, obviously this rate hike of 50 basis points or 0.5% was the first time in over 2 decades that this has happened. Typically, it's by a quarter point at a time. So it's definitely something very new, or at least new in the last 20 plus years. And this affects, like Paul said, variable rate mortgages, HELOCs, unsecured lines of credit, student loans, business loans, anything with a floating rate. And so, this is obviously to curb inflation or to kind of where we're at of an 8% right now, and as right around where inflation is, which is obviously astronomical as well. A lot of clients just reaching out whether they should, whether they should lock into fixed rates. It always happens leading up to a rate hike, and then right after it as well, or the day of. People asking what they should do, whether they should lock in and or stay the course, and typically it's exactly that, stay in the course. When you're looking at converting to a fixed rate mortgage, you're doing so at the current term remaining in your mortgage, their best rate. But a lot of times, especially right now, the spread between the two, whether it be 3, 4, or 5 year fixed, the spread between the variable rate and those fixed rates on those 3 different varying terms are upwards around 1.5% to 2%. It's a pretty big spread, regardless of what variable's doing, and even though they are forecasting additional rate hikes, that's a big jump. Again, we've talked about it before. You have to be consciously making that decision to pay 1.5% higher immediately instead of waiting, and as well that penalty difference. So it's certainly, I know it does get on people's mind, and I always say as well, if it's really a personal decision as well, locking in that rate, not having to think about it. A lot of people that have not had variable before, and over the past year and a half, variable actually outpaced fixed as far as the product being sold. So a lot of new people with variable, they kind of overthink it. They, really, focus in on what the Bank of Canada is doing and how that's going to impact them. One thing to keep in mind from a quick math standpoint, with this rate hike of 0.5%. So 0.5% has scared everyone. It equates to $23 every $100,000 in your mortgage. So for somebody with a $300,000 mortgage, your rate is changing by $69, a month. When you're qualifying for that mortgage, you're qualifying at a rate of 5.25%. People's rates right now are around 2.25% roughly on variable, 2.5. So you've qualified originally for a much higher rate regardless. It's not a huge, they're not huge jumps. Obviously they impact budgeting, but making the conscious decision to jump by 1.5%, you're jumping at almost $75 for every 100,000. That has a big impact.
Yeah. And we've been pretty spoiled for the last few years. I know when I bought my first home, I want to say I took a variable rate and it was 2.95 or 3%. And I thought that was like a killer rate, And then I think my second home, my variable was 2.25%. And that was with getting like a massive discount. So even now, most people are probably sitting at 2.2 or 2.3 with the, prime minus probably 1 or 0.9%. I mean, that's still historically an unbelievable rate, right? I mean, 2.25 is certainly nothing to shake a fist at. And again, like you said, rates are probably going to continue to go up. But, I know we were talking about this over the weekend, but there's also the likelihood of potentially, a slight recession, going into next year, which will probably adjust rates again in a different way. So, we've seen this, obviously we see this day in and day out. So we work with 30 different lenders. Rates are changing literally daily, almost, at least for one of the lenders. So we see rates go up and down. We've seen them been going up and down for 10 years being in the industry. And, really nothing changes as far as the market. I mean, I've seen more homes for sale in the last 3 days just driving around than there's been probably in the last 3 months. So, I mean, things are still moving. Transactions are still happening. The rates are going to be what they are. And if it gets to a point where people can no longer afford the rates that they're at, they'll probably just extend amortization to 30 years or 35 years or whatever. I mean, there's always kind of that the banks don't make money if people aren't buying homes or aren't borrowing money. So, I mean, they need to keep the industry moving, and they'll just adjust the market in one way or another to balance that out. We used to have 40-year amortizations and 5% rates. Rates go down to, 1.5%, 2%, and amortization's 25 years, and rates go up again. I think the easiest thing they would do is just extend that amortization again from 25 to 30 years, make payments slightly lower, more affordable for people, and keep things moving.
But really, as of 2018, with bringing in the stress test, people have been qualifying at higher rates anyways. So right now, if qualifying for a mortgage on a fixed rate mortgage, you're qualifying at the 5-year fixed rate plus 2%. So, I'll use TD as an example. I think their 5-year fixed is around 4.04. Certainly, numbers that we haven't heard in a very long time, but you're qualifying at 6.04 for a mortgage, as opposed to about a month and a half ago, you were qualifying at the posted rate of 5.25%. Now, the flip side of that is that on a variable rate mortgage, you're still qualifying at that 5.25. So at that typical posted stress test. But something you made a good point about is, as inflation keeps growing and as they're raising rates, there's also macroeconomic indicators signaling a recession. We've had the 10-year US Treasury bond yield invert, over the last month, a few times, or last few weeks. Those are always early indicators of a recession. So, all things pointing to them raising rates to kind of slow down inflation. However, everything that's being done also might not be done quick enough for us to have our GDP contract and have to then go the opposite way and drop rates, drop the overnight lending rate in order to spur economic activity. So it'll be interesting to see it, over the next, like you said, over the next rest of the year, how those macroeconomic indicators and bond yields on the Treasury keep indicating, and whether GDP starts to contract, signaling that. And again, that all goes with variable rate mortgages. You feel a little bit of the pinch when rates are increasing, but you also take advantage when they decrease. So, prime prior to the pandemic in February 2020 was at 3.95%. We're still only at 3.2. So we're at February of 2020. We have episodes from back then of the market being crazy, it being on fire, and prime was at 3.95 and rates were around 3.65, 3.75, were your typical 5-year fixed rates. The market was going crazy. These weren't conversations of this, the market falling and people's hair being on fire. There's still, 75 basis points to really run up until we actually hit what bank prime was prior to the pandemic. So a lot of people kind of have that short-sighted as far as like what they're looking at from a historical standpoint. They just know because they haven't, they don't focus on housing on a regular basis. They obviously don't buy every year. And so they're not looking at those mortgage rates or bank prime. And so, they're looking at this very short period of time of this last 6 months or this last year, this last 2 years. And they're seeing, rates were as low as, on a fixed sub 2%, but that was an anomaly. That's not the norm.
Yeah. And going back to what I was saying about us being spoiled, I think people also, because the rates have been so low, people haven't been out spending money, right? People have been working from home. So people they've been able to kind of build up their savings accounts, or, I think we talked about, I don't know the exact number, you might remember, Dave, but it's like an outrageous number of money that Canadians are holding in their bank accounts right now. It's like billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Some record number. So now with things increasing, people are a lot more conscious of their spending because they haven't been spending for 2 years, right? It's like, okay, well, I make my mortgage payment, we buy groceries, and that's essentially what they're buying. No one's even buying gas, really. No one was driving anywhere. So everyone kind of got into a mindset of this abundance of cash. And now, rates increase. So my mortgage payment's going up a couple hundred, and food's gone up a couple hundred, and gas is up. So everyone's now spending instead of saving. So I think there's just that shift in mentality where for the last couple of years, everyone's been able to kind of, get that security blanket. And now they're having to kind of spend more just because everything is opening up and we're trending in that direction. Well, one thing you mentioned a few weeks ago that I think is really valuable for people to understand, and something I've been certainly advising clients as well, is, when people ask me, what are you doing? Like, should I lock in now? What should I do? I know you said it's personal choice, and it certainly is. But, most mortgages allow you the flexibility of increasing your payments by anywhere from 15 to 20%. So if you're in a variable rate, instead of, I know you said this, Dave, like instead of voluntarily increasing your payment by a 1.5% and paying all that interest to the bank, you can literally voluntarily increase your payment by 20% yourself. Your payment will be the same as if you locked it in, but that extra money is going to the principal balance instead of to the bank. So as rates continue to increase, you're at least building that buffer in your equity and in your mortgage pay down that is going back into your pocket instead of, to the bank. So there, you can still have that peace of mind of knowing that you're not going to get completely dumbfounded as rates increase or, basically completely blown out of the water as far as what you're paying. But instead of voluntarily choosing to pay an extra $400 in interest or $500 in interest, pay that $400 or $500 in principal and put it back in your pockets, that if rates do increase, at least that money is already in your pocket in the form of equity, as opposed to going to the bank and their shareholders in the form of interest.
And psychologically as well, I think a lot of people want to lock into a fixed for just that relief psychologically of, I don't have to worry about or think about what the Bank of Canada is doing or what inflation is doing. And that's where I kind of talk to clients about it being, I could show as many numbers as you want and historical numbers and charts, kind of comparing the two, even with predicted rate increases, things like that. But at the end of the day, you need to feel comfortable in what product you're in and whether it's variable or fixed, regardless of what, what we say here or whomever you're speaking with. You need to, if it's something that's going to weigh on you psychologically on an ongoing basis and you're constantly searching for those headlines or worrying about it, then variable might not be for you. And so certainly contact your financial institution, get a quote for that rate lock and do the numbers and just see what that looks like. And like Paul said, if it's something where you don't want to worry about the rate increases, you could just increase your payments and lock them in at that higher amount, building in that 1.5-2% buffer to where fixed rates are now. That, whatever that bank quotes you, you could do the math of, okay, this is what my payments would be, X, I'm paying now this, let's lock it in at that higher amount and continue paying that. Like Paul said, pay down the mortgage quicker and build that in so you don't have to worry about it. As rates go up, your payments are going to stay the same. All that's going to change is that amount going to interest within that higher payment. and what's going to principal. And you're kind of getting the best of both worlds in that regard as well. Alternatively, if you are getting a new mortgage right now or buying a home, you could also look at going with a financial institution that locks in the rate. So I've heard it from a couple of people this week asking about capped variable mortgages. Those are different, but there are a couple institutions that will, on their variable rate mortgages, they'll be fixed locked in payments based on the rate, the effective rate on closing. So your variable rate on closing, and whatever Bank of Canada does, up or down, your payments stay the same. It's the amount within interest and principal within that payment that adjusts. The one downside to it is as prime goes up, it's possible that, they kind of say to you, well, you were on a 30-year amortization and you come to the end of your 5-year term and you've only paid down technically 1 year because, payments stayed the same and interest increased. So there are kind of those pros and cons, but that is something you could look at when getting into if you're buying a new home now or refinancing, what have you, to give you that peace of mind as well.
So I just want to reflect as well. Great points all around. I just want to reflect as well on the federal budget, because I know that was got a lot of comments, a lot of questions after last episode. What's been kind of the response in your network as far as the stuff that was released? Because I know when we talked last week, it was still pretty fresh. Like it came out a few days prior to the recording. Over the last week, now that the dust has settled a bit, what have you kind of been hearing through your network as far as just response and what's everyone's feeling of the changes?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't really hear much from anyone on it. There wasn't really, from my accountant, there wasn't really anything from a tax perspective that was impacted. People were expecting more, things there. There wasn't really any huge hits there. On the housing side, people kind of laughed, if you will. And as far as whether what is being proposed is actually going to really benefit or not, or really be imposed where it makes a drastic change. Again, like we talked about before, the foreign buyer ban, people really kind of echoed a lot of the same sentiment that we had, and the market indicates, is that there are very few foreign buyers purchasing homes. So that ban, is that really going to drastically impact things? The TFSA, again, people echoed it being great. And one of the comments that we had actually on our last week's episode was kind of commenting to that, and from a Dan H, and kind of just commenting about the $8,000 a year cap to contribute to the TFSA, that it might be to defer demand until future years. And I think that's an interesting point. If that's the concern, really, this is for down payment. Are they, is that really going to drive demand by these, by individuals having funds available for down payment, spreading it out over 5 years, like we talked about? Really, you're not able to catch up with what housing prices are doing, even at a small incremental increase. So, overall, the sentiment, at least that I received or heard, was kind of kind of a blah, if you will, reaction to it. How about yourself?
Yeah, very similar. Not too much, not too many questions, more concerns about the rate than the rates increasing than any of the changes being proposed. I think everything we talked about last week, nothing in there, like the headlines, like Greg said, it kind of makes you feel like, like they're getting things done. But then when you actually dig into it, it's like, oh, it's pretty much exactly how it is right now. Not too many big changes that are coming, like as far as actuality. There were a few good comments on the episode from last week. One here from Sharon, B. Sharon, says, I wonder how long before these rate hikes will affect the price of homes on the higher end, since less people will be able to afford the $1 million plus homes. Also, with the rate hikes, I see less incentive as well as affordability to enable someone to sell their freehold townhome to upgrade to a single home. Will this not eventually lead to a decline in the price of the higher end homes due to decrease in demand / affordability? And could this price decline eventually trickle down to the lower end homes down the road? How will the average family be able to afford a single home priced over $1 million at a fixed rate term of 6%? assuming he means qualifying side, or unless rates continue to go that way. Will they be forced to rent out rooms to pay some of the mortgage? What do you guys think?
I don't I don't think that there's going to be any change. That's me personally. I think there'll be a little bit of there might be I think it's a slowdown in the market anyways when there's worry about rates or kind of talk about rates. I think with where inflation is at and where gas is and oil is at, I think has more of an impact of people kind of, like you said, Paul, evaluating their expenditures. But at the end of the day, prices for homes are where they're at, and people need shelter. Mm-hmm. They're for what people can qualify for, especially in a city like Ottawa. Prices over $1 million. I mean, again, the difference between 5.25% and 6%, it's not a huge drop in what you're qualifying for, and those with where, especially in Ottawa, where people's household incomes are at or average incomes are at, they're qualifying for over $1 million anyways on that stress test. And I get, it's an average, kind of a combined income of 200,000, 225, 250, you're qualifying for $1 million a quarter loan amount, not purchase price. That's not uncommon in Ottawa. I mean, there's a lot of federal employees that their average income is, 80 and 90,000. So you're hitting those marks just with a couple that's working for the federal government and no one, and not in a high paying job, really, so to speak. I don't know that the rate increases are going to impact the over $1 million threshold. I think where inflation and the oil prices impact is the middle and lower income classes. Unfortunately, a lot of times it doesn't actually have as big an impact on the middle upper class.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, those people that are all buying, or let's say the average household income or their household income is say $200,000 to $250,000. They're also probably selling a home that has $750,000 equity in it. If they lived in a home that was already if it was worth 500 or 750 10 years ago, and they're selling that now, that home itself is a $1.5 million or whatever it may be. So they're also getting half to $750,000 in equity that they can then use on that new home. So it's not as if they're just putting a minimum down payment and buying a $1.5 million home. They already have a lot of the equity built up that they can then essentially transfer over to that new property. So I'm in agreement. I think, I think Greg said the number, there was like 20% of the homes or something that sold in Ottawa a couple weeks ago was sold for over $1 million. And I know my brother was just saying, he's out in Orleans. He was saying that one of the townhomes, I think it was a townhome, at least a row home of some sort, near his place just sold for over 800. So, I mean, people are clearly still affording these, whether or not they have to get a co-applicant or they're I think Jerome mentioned, having people live with them. I mean, we could see that too. I mean, if home prices get to I mean, I was going to say obscene, but a more obscene price point, then, we might see people, residing with family members, having their parents actually move in, or, using that pension to qualify, or living with their brother and sister and getting a 5-bedroom instead of a 2 or 3-bedroom, So, I mean, there's always, people are very creative. I mean, we've talked about this before. Everyone needs shelter. People need a place to live, and people get creative. I mean, it's everyone, household income in Ottawa being, 106,000 on average. You get 2 or 3 people, you can pretty much qualify at least for whatever you'd like. It's just a matter of getting the right ducks in a row,
Yeah, in 2018, people were qualifying at the contract rate. People you were qualifying for a mortgage at what your 5-year fixed rate was, no stress test. They brought the federal government, prices were increasing substantially. The federal government brought in the stress test to slow down the market. It didn't slow it down at all. People were then qualifying for the 5-year fix plus 2, or the average of the big 6 banks 5-year posted rate, which was, at the time in the 5%. This did not slow down the market. People could already qualify anyways, or they just brought in a family member to co-sign anyways on that mortgage, and it never slowed down the market. People don't need to live in the home to co-sign. A first-time home buyer happens all the time. Parents go on and to help the kid out and they co-sign, or family members, siblings co-signing on a property together to help one another buy, because they know that their mortgage payments are less than what they're qualifying at. They're borrowing at 2.25% on a variable, or 2.5%, but they're qualifying at 5.25%. Well, that's not their payment amount. And so a family member just goes on and helps them out, or that they have a cash job that income's not being used. So they get a family member on to help them qualify, or they're in the gig economy and their Uber Eats, income or Uber driving isn't being used. Things like that. There's a lot of income that is not used by banks either. So when we're talking about qualifying, they're only looking at your salaried income, your 2-year average, or if you're self-employed. Again, there are very few programs, and they're barely taking into account what a self-employed individual is using for mortgage qualifying. It's very stringent on what they use, and then they're qualifying you at that Bank of Canada posted rate. So there's a lot more affordability for people than people think, or in the general public, because of how restricted the banks are for what income they'll use to qualify.
So I did get some numbers while we were recording here. So
you're not just ignoring me. You weren't just staring down, ignoring me. Okay.
No, I'm actually trying to keep the numbers rolling here. So yeah, Dave's talking. I'm just like falling asleep here for anyone who's just listening. So as of today, total of 2,168 listings in total on MLS. 1,616 condo and freehold as of right now. So 1616 as of this second right now. So not this week, but as of right now, not including rentals. So the 2168 included rental listings. So 1,616 homes currently listed. In the last 7 days, 618 new listings and only 560 sold. So more listings than sold in the last week.
Good.
There you go. Little snapshot.
Pretty close to new listings in the last 7 days to sold. 560 to 618. However, again, that is a good sign for home buyers, and prices slowing down and hopefully leveling out, where you can get some conditions on things. Yeah. So I think that's. I've
been saying that to people too. Right? I said, that I've seen it even just on my own street and in my neighborhood. I've been seeing more, listings or coming soons or for sale signs pop up. So it's typical. This is a spring market. This is how it goes every single year. So this isn't an anomaly by any means, but it's good to see it, because it is going to balance out the market, at least in the short term. And then, we'll probably see come October, November, we'll probably see the same thing happen again. Less homes on the market. Prices will go up again over the winter. And that's at least how the market's been going for the last few years. So I'm just noticing my eyebrows look fierce right now with the shadows. Holy jumping. I might have to get into the mood boost. Let's see here. I got 4 today.
All right.
Number 1, my dog, after eating lots of Easter dinner here, my dog's not fat. He's just a little husky. That one hit me in the face.
Mine's Winston's definitely husky. That's for sure.
Yeah, and he ain't a husky. Number 2, just burned my Hawaiian pizza. Should have put it on aloha temperature.
Oh, wow.
Number 3, my car only works every other day. I think it might be the alternator.
Okay. That one's better.
Last but not least, my friend drove his expensive car into a tree and found out how his Mercedes Benz.
All right. Okay.
That was not bad. That one's good.
They're better than last week's.
Quick shout out to Referral Mortgages, all our amazing agents, our amazing operations team. Shout outs to the Agency Ottawa, growing brokerage. Greg is the managing director over there, and I know they're doing some good things. If you haven't seen it, I believe, I think it's on Netflix, maybe Prime. The Agency in LA, they have an awesome show that I know Greg said everyone asks him about. Also, shout out to our coffee sponsor, North Brew. If you go to northbrew.ca and use the promo code podcast, you will get 20% off your coffee orders, and 20% of your order does go to the Ottawa homeless community. So great coffee, great cause. And shout out to Stephen Hopkins Video. He's our producer, one of a kind wizard. and he helps us get all this great content out to you folks. So if you're still listening, which you probably aren't, make sure to subscribe, review, comment, and we'll see you next week. Dave, have a great day.
You too. Deuces.
All right, see you everyone.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe because we'd really like that.